So welcome back to the Drive to Succeed podcast. We have Lucy Dabo on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So I believe this is actually a first time meeting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Although we've been interacting through LinkedIn for quite a while now. So.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you in person. Always good to put a face to a name.
You too. Thank you so much. So I know that you've been running Dabo Co for the past 14, 15 years ago, and you sold it in 2015. So I assume half of Dubai already know who you are.
I'm not sure about that.
But the other half, for our first-time listeners who still doesn't know you, who is Lucy Dabo?
Well, now I kind of call this my second chapter of my career. I'm a business mentor, communications consultant, and executive coach. But I started out my career and set up a business with my sister, which is in itself considered fairly unusual, back in 2004, doing PR, events and digital. We ran the business for 15 years, and then we were acquired by Edelman, who were the largest American firm, the largest in our industry, back in 2015. So from the very beginning, setting up the business with my sister and I in my spare room, all the way through to exiting 15 years later.
So I'm just really curious about, you started one of the, you can say, largest PR agencies in the region. What is your background, and how do you transition from your previous background and starting this company, Dabo Co, and of course exited from that company as well?
So way back, yeah, I was about to say. So I'll try and put it into bite-sized pieces to answer all of those aspects. Basically, I grew up in Dubai, so my family moved here from Sudan in 1982. So I'm probably giving my age away a bit too. Please don't do the math. But this was sort of, big family move. So expat brat, as people like to term people who grew up here. I would like to say less of the brat. But basically, we were educated, my sister and I, back in the UK, and we both came back to Dubai. It's one of those places that, however much you try and leave, the temptation to come back was so great. So I moved back here in 2000, finishing university and, my first couple of jobs in London. And my sister had already relocated here. My sister Camilla, she was working in advertising. I was working in events. Both of us in agencies. Both of us technically doing PR, but with different hats on. And this is going way back when, the industries were still defining themselves very much in the UAE. And naturally, sisters, we're super close. We're 4 years apart, but we are best friends. So every day after work, we'd go and meet and have drinks, talk about work, as you do. And both of us were always coming back to the same point, that we were so frustrated with the businesses we worked in, because either they were missing opportunities, that they weren't putting clients first, that they were getting unqualified people to do the work. And it was a time where, Media City was only just opening.
Understood.
And there was a lot of kind of businesses opening and closing, and we just felt so strongly that we could just be doing much better work for our clients in our respective agencies. And then one night, probably a few drinks too many, we were like, what? Hang on a minute. Why the hell aren't we doing this ourselves? Like, what is stopping us from coming together, integrating all our skills and knowledge? Camilla had the PR background, the advertising background. I had advertising and events background. Yeah. So together we could cover everything and offer a fully integrated one-stop shop for our clients. And we get to work together. Yeah. And imagine, we were so dreamy-eyed about it. Imagine working in the best possible place with your best friend, your sister, doing the work that you love. And that's kind of how the idea came about. We never imagined for a second that we would end up, with over 100 employees and being acquired by the largest agency in our field globally. 15 years later. So it was quite a journey.
And because I'm really interested, because I'm also a startup, a solopreneur myself. When you were starting out, where do you open shop? Do you recommend setting an office, or because nowadays there's a lot of co-working spaces? Yeah. I mean, where do you work back then? Because some of the people doesn't know, most of the founders started from maybe in the basement or in their room, you know.
So we had, a very similar story. Of course, everything's changed, as you rightly said. We were in a very small niche of people setting up businesses, particularly in our industry then. And we made the call not to go to Media City because we felt that being onshore and having an economic department license gave us real gravitas. And we were so focused on being perceived as very serious and very robust and very, proper. We have very, strong values around doing things the right way. So the first step, obviously we did a business plan, just to go back a step, as every great entrepreneur should. But we did, we spent time crafting a document that made a lot of sense. Because for us, if we were going to take the leap and take the risk, we needed to be really clear that we understood what we were going to do and how it was going to look. And interestingly enough, before we even had our license come through, we had already been put forward to pitch for our first piece of work. So one of the steps we took was I left my job first because we wanted to keep an income coming into the business, but also have the time to build the infrastructure, because in those days you needed your business license, you needed to have bricks and mortar. There was no option to be kind of mobile, and there was no such thing as that 15 years ago, and do all of the infrastructural stuff that was really quite lengthy and administrative. So we agreed that Camilla would do 3 months, we'd use her income into the business, and I would use those 3 months to build our infrastructure. So back then, trying to get an office was one of the hardest things in the world. And in those days, there wasn't enough office space. So a lot of residential buildings were used as offices. So apartment buildings were converted to commercial use.
And there was no regulation back then yet.
Well, a little bit of regulation, but there just wasn't space. So, landlords were saying, I've got a whole building full of apartments that could be full of offices. But there was so little availability because they weren't able to build fast enough. So if you wanted to find an office, you had to open up the Gulf News, good old-fashioned newspaper, and they had a segment which was classified, and you'd have to go through all these tiny little writing to find what was available. And we were looking, obviously, for a very small space, for a one-bedroom apartment, commercial use, and literally, if you were not on the doorstep at 8 a.m. in the morning meeting, the agent, gone. So I remember when we finally found our office, I was the first person in the door. There were 10 people behind me, and I had to hold the door closed while I called my sister to go, I think I found our place, but we have to say yes now. If I don't, we lose it. So thankfully she agreed. We said yes. She'd never even seen the office. And we signed our first rental agreement with huge sweaty palms going, this is a huge amount of money. Will we ever make it back? But it's changed quite a bit since then.
Understood. And what is the feeling like when you got your first ever client? Because I know you told me you resigned first and then Camilla went second. So what is your, how do you deliver that project or client as well? Because I know when you're starting up, there are times where as business owners, especially when you're starting, you tend to like over-deliver or over-promise. What does it feel like, and how does the client perceive you back then? Because I'm just really curious. First, most of our listeners probably would like to start their own business or probably,
So the great thing was, in our line of work, we were staying within our industry. So I already had built up a really strong network of clients, as had Camilla, because we weren't sort of creating a new product or launching a whole new concept. We were basically opening a consultancy in the field that we already knew.
Understood.
So we already had a reputation in the market as individuals. So there was a level of credibility that came with that.
Level of trust.
Which is really important. So depending on the type of business you're setting up, credibility was our focus. From day one, our most important focus was we have to be the most credible that we can be, because we're dealing with brands, we're dealing with reputations. It's really important that we are, standing behind that. So the first piece of business was actually an old client of mine who rang me and said, "Hey, Lucy, we need you to come in. We want you to pitch for a piece of business," which happened to be a polo tournament. So it was basically to organise the tournament, to sell all the sponsorship, to do all the media relations and the PR. So it was quite a big, juicy project. For your first thing. And I was like, "I'm really sorry, I've just resigned, so I'm not going to be here to be able to, I'm leaving in a couple of weeks, but I can pass you on to my counterpart." And the client was like, no, I was calling you. I'm not interested. If it's a new business, you pitch. I don't care how you do it, but we're really keen that you come and pitch for it. So I was like, okay then. So that was just the greatest gift, because we had someone who already had faith. I had already delivered for and worked for before. Camilla was still in her job, so we had to create this code word so that I would be working on the proposal, emailing it to her at work, but she obviously couldn't get caught.
Yeah, exactly.
So we came up with this code name, The Mint with a Hole, which obviously was polo. So then we were back and forth permanently with our code name, The Mint with the Hole, as we built the proposal out and then went to pitch it. And lo and behold, they gave us the business. We won. We had the best concept, the best delivery idea. So I can't tell you how exciting that was. We were just so proud and then totally terrified.
Because you need to deliver.
You need to deliver. But, we knew we were capable of doing that. And fortunately, because it was such a big project, we had a kind of 6-month window to be prepared and to execute. So actually, between us, we were able to get everything prepared. I was able to immediately start sourcing sponsors. And then we ended up having that client for about 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
So it was a really brilliant project for us.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now I just feel the energy of getting your first client.
It's a big one. I mean, I think there is nothing in this world that can prepare you. And you'll know, you're an entrepreneur, of when you take the risk to do something on your own and it starts to pay off. It's just so exciting.
You feel like you doubt yourself. Can I do this? Can I do this? That, and then you just make it happen.
Although I have to say, I don't know that the doubting ever goes. Camilla and I always reflect on that. The inner critic permanently coming up going, are you doing good enough? Could you do more?
One of my questions would be interesting, because you always brought up Camilla, which is your best friend. I'm just really curious. I know this is really difficult when running with your family member. So how do you manage working with her, especially when a tough decision needs to be made, and how does the synergy work on it?
Well, I think any partnership is really challenging in business, whether it's a relative, a friend, a colleague. I think people who do go into partnership, it's a big step and actually should never be underestimated. There's a huge benefit because you're never alone. However, the disadvantages are that if you're not completely aligned around your values, your belief systems, that is when major challenges will come up. And the one advantage of being family is that you have the same beliefs and values because you grew up together. So the kind of level of integrity that was so important for us about how to behave, how to treat people, these really simple life lessons that actually become hugely important when you're running a business. To go, as simple as how do you say hello to people? How do you greet someone at the beginning of a meeting? How do you behave around negotiation? How do you behave about employing somebody or a pay rise or a conflict? All of these things can be really challenging if you don't share a very clear set of values. For us, it was challenging whether we'd been sisters or not. Those first, I would say it took us 2 years probably until we had really nailed it. And the biggest piece of advice I would give, and it seems so obvious, but the amount of partners I've met who haven't actually carved it out, is being really clear about roles. You have to be really, really, really decisive about that and carve out, partner one, you do this and only this, and partner two, you do this, and that's what you're responsible for. And yes, when decisions on either side need to be made, we'll come together, but ultimately, the moment you have overlaps or a bit of a grey area, then of course it's open like anything in life. The lack of clarity creates conflict every time. So biggest piece of advice: clarity, clarity, clarity. Because you can't ever have conflict. If you're like, okay, I'm in charge of X, Y, and Z, you're in charge of A, B, and C. Excellent. And then we'll come together to update each other on progress and make the final, sign on the dotted line. But that was absolutely the key.
Understood. And is there come to a point where after office hours you're still talking about business or?
My goodness, it was insane. I mean, I think our husbands deserve major awards because it was 24/7. It still is. I mean, we're very much joined at the hip. But no, Christmas Day, Eid holidays,
But
all the time.
Be stressful to your family back then or even until now that, you're talking about business where you can we just not talk about business today? Or
It was, but actually I see it more on reflection now that we don't work together anymore, although we're still best friends and sisters and see each other a lot. I can really recognize how much we were on 24/7 because we're also so close that we have a lot of mutual friends.
Yeah.
So the weekends and the evenings when we did finally get any, because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't get much time off. It was a pretty relentless conversation. But I would also say I think that's what made us great, that we were very aware what was happening across our business all the time because we were always talking. We were always connected, up to date, involved. There was no sort of absence, which also was an advantage.
And I'm also curious about, you grew your Dabo Co to 100 employees, as you mentioned. And it's also mentioned as one of the great agencies to work for. And there's one interview that you made, I think it was sometime last year. I forget the name of the show, Business is Personal, I think, where you mentioned that it's important to have a positive exit or
Yes.
What does it mean? I mean, can you just tell us about that?
I think that's one of the things we're most proud of, was our culture and our amazing team. The one thing is no employee is forever.
Yeah.
People will come and people will go, but they may come back.
Yeah.
And that was something we really, for us, doing the right thing was always a priority. And treating people as you would like to be treated was a huge priority. And what so many businesses forget is that when someone's leaving the company, first of all, you need to know why. Because there is always going to be room for improvement.
Understood.
And in an ideal world, you would have fixed whatever it is before they leave. But sometimes it's other circumstances, or we weren't in a position to, give them that particular role or give them that growth that they were looking for. But the reality is, your employees are your most important advocates. And ultimately, getting the right talent to come and work in your business doesn't just come from posting a recruitment ad. Your company is a brand as much as the brands you represent. And for us, the kind of brand we wanted Dabo Co to be was a great place to work because to be the best, we knew we needed the best talent. And therefore, having great people out in the market who'd had the experience of working with us, but also were really supported on their way out of the business onto their next career move, knowing that they would spread the word about what a great place it was to work, but also there was always a chance they would come back. And for us, the door was always open. And we did have people who, either one left and within 48 hours had returned. Really? In fact, that was the fastest return. She was like, I made a terrible mistake. We were like, it's okay, we get it, come back. But then sometimes it was, 2 years later, coming back, having gone to get other experience. And bring that experience back.
But isn't it the level of trust may come down a little bit when someone left and then someone just decided to come back? And
look, that was only once, and I know that particular individual was really conflicted about leaving. And when you're young, and it was their first job had been with us. You have to respect that they're going to be curious. And if they're not curious, do you really want them to work for you? You have to spread your wings. You have to go and see, what other businesses are doing. And yes, they realized very quickly it wasn't the right business, and they were a particular talent that we were very happy to have back. But we have what we call, and it's kind of tonight actually, we're doing a reunion. It's the Dabo alumni, and it's this network of all the people that have ever worked in our business are all very much connected.
Yeah.
There is a real community, where they still look out for each other. We all still keep in touch. Everyone's moved on to do wonderful things, in other agencies, in other businesses. In fact, so many of them set up their own businesses, and that's a wonderful community that we all know that human engagement and supporting one another is such an important part of personal growth and professional development. So,
understood. So, Dabo Co alumni is still existing now, where tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, we don't have sort of it's not formal, but it's kind of the hashtag Dabo gang, where
you share industries and what's happening.
And just stay connected, because we're all in the same industry, so there's always, something that you can help one another. But most importantly, we all really liked each other. Mm-hmm. One of the really important things about having a great place to work is to have shared interests, respect for one another, and professional courtesy. So, yeah, it's really wonderful to see that community continues long after the business